Shalom. One of the underlying themes that connects between many of the concepts found in this week's Torah portion of Parashat Emor relates to one of the greatest challenges that we all face throughout our everyday lives: how to stay focused on God while living in this world of illusion. How can we keep up a tight connection with Hashem as people, as human beings, while our finite world whirls through time and space? Our portion this week is actually all about perceptions of reality. Everything in existence, including time, really has one source, one root, Hashem himself. And there at the source, everything is one. And the dimensions of space and time and life all intersect and they all come together. As the Torah portion of Emor begins this week in Leviticus chapter 21, we move from the general rules of holiness for all of Israel that were taught in Parashat Kedoshim back to the rules for the Kohanim, the priestly descendants of Aaron that are serving in the sanctuary. Torah addresses itself to the Kohanim, who, through their attending to the divine service in the Holy Temple, are responsible for the very dwelling of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, in this world. So they are enjoined to distance themselves from what Torah essentially reveals to us to be the illusion of death, an illusion which, although in the meantime is an integral part of the human condition, it's still false, and thus the Kohanim are instructed to ignore it so as not to lose their balance, their spiritual balance. For them, this false illusion is nothing but a distraction. At the end of chapter 22, we read, "You shall observe my commandments and perform them. I am Hashem. You shall not desecrate my holy name. Rather, I should be sanctified among the children of Israel. I am Hashem who sanctifies you, who took you out of the land of Egypt to be a God unto you. I am Hashem." You know, when the mind is numbed by the seeming banality and the perceived futility of the human condition, the mind becomes enslaved by fear, and the spirit subjugated. That's exactly what the Egyptian exile was all about, and that is a desecration of Hashem's name. He reminds us in these verses, "I am Hashem who sanctifies you, who took you out of the land of Egypt to be for you a God." When a person thinks that one day simply leads to the next, and every day is the same, with no chance for change, that nothing matters, that death is the end, that relationships can be taken for granted, that is the deepest exile. Because a person becomes convinced that this world, this life, can't be imbued with holiness, with a higher purpose, with redemption. So open up your heart. The entire chapter 23 is about sanctifying time. After this verse, more than any other aspect of our lives, it's the passage of time which can make a person feel most vulnerable and defenseless. It's the passage of time that can make us feel trapped, like captives, like victims. Thus, this chapter begins with the verse, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, these are Hashem's appointed festivals that you shall designate as holy occasions. These are my appointed festivals." The divine commandments to observe all of the festivals are to be found here in this chapter. The festivals are called mo'adim, which literally means meetings. The festivals are man's rendezvous with God in the dimension of time, and they are days that are called mikra'e kodesh, holy occasions. But these words can also be understood to be, they call out holiness. And as the circle of the year turns, the appointed times of Hashem, beginning with the weekly Shabbat, and each festival at its appointed time, these days literally call out holiness. Through the element of sanctified time, these days raise us up from falling into the death trap of complacency. They hold us back from falling into the abyss of the gaping maw of meaningless time, and they realign us to stay focused on Hashem in our lives. In this very chapter, we also find the singular commandment regarding the counting of the Omer. The word Omer is a unit of measure, here referring to a measure of barley, which in the time of the Holy Temple is harvested on the night of the 16th of Nisan, at the conclusion of the first day of the festival of Passover, and is brought as a wave offering in the Holy Temple the next day. God commands Israel to literally count off each day during this period of time, marking the 49 days, 7 complete weeks, that fall between Passover and Shavuot, that connect between the festival of Passover and the festival of first fruits and time of giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And as we speak, we are currently in the midst of this very special period. And each night we are counting the days and weeks left until the 50th day. But what is the purpose of the count? So there are many levels of understanding this commandment, just like there are always many levels of Torah knowledge. A simple understanding is presented by the classic work known as Sefer HaChinuch, the Book of Education, explains that this count is an expression of joyous anticipation, like a person who's looking forward with great enthusiasm to an important event. So we begin counting from the day following the first day of Pesach, the day that Israel left Egypt, the day we began our journey towards receiving the Torah at the Sinai Revelation. On Passover, Israel was redeemed physically, but the Exodus itself is not yet the end of the road. Freedom is not simply liberation from oppression. True freedom is spiritual redemption. So the holy Rabbi Nachman teaches that counting the Omer also reminds us that a person has to know that his own days are numbered, and that he will be required to give a reckoning on how each hour and each moment were spent. And sometimes we want to do something, even something great, even something important, but we find various reasons to push it off. Tomorrow I have a test, tonight I have an appointment, I'm too busy with work, or something is going on that I can't miss. And every day brings its own excuses. And so many times we push things off, but the counting of the Omer is also about counting our own days and understanding that every day has its own special significance. And what is not done today will never be able to be done again, because today isn't coming back. And tomorrow is a new day with its own new challenges and new goals. Numerous verses in the Torah that you remember, such as today, if you hearken to his voice in Psalm 95, and that which I command you today in Deuteronomy 6, and of course, see, I present before you today a blessing and a curse in Deuteronomy 11. All these verses and more teach us that all we have is today, that today is for action. Today is for motivation and change, and really, I cannot wait until tomorrow. But open up your heart deeper still, because there's another side to this whole concept of counting. These days of the Omer are accompanied by a challenge of a spiritual assignment. Our sages teach us that on the night of the Exodus, just in the nick of time, God shined a powerful divine light upon the children of Israel. This intense holy light washed over them, lifting them up and propelling their exit from Egypt, their exodus, lighting their path that night along the way to redemption, illuminating and shattering the fixed borders of reality, leading the nation of Israel to freedom. But then God withdrew this divine light immediately after the first night of Passover, and in its place, a sort of imprint was left, a memory of that light. Why was it withdrawn? Because Israel needed that great acceleration in order to escape that place of slavery. But although they gained physical freedom, they were still stuck in a slave mentality, still servants to Pharaoh in their own minds. And their haste was so great and the light was so powerful that the people were unprepared. And this is actually alluded to, the secret of the verse. You shall eat it in haste. And they baked the dough that they took out of Egypt into unleavened cakes, for they could not be leavened. For they were driven from Egypt, for they could not delay, nor had they made provisions for themselves, because nothing that they could do could have possibly prepared them for this moment. On a deeper level still, we're taught that because they were not yet ready to make the proper effort, the light was undeserved. Because no spiritual gain can ever be real and lasting without a personal soul-level acquisition, and that only comes through hard work. There are no shortcuts. So the very next day the light departed, and they descended from that high level, beginning their journey through the desert and slowly starting all over again. Step by step, they had to learn to restore that light through their own effort, through their own merit, by preparing themselves to receive Torah at Mount Sinai 7 weeks later. That generation was a template of redemption for all time. And the same process applies to all of us. And each year on the night of the Exodus, the first night of Passover, the Seder night, we receive the same divine light, and then just as quickly it departs. And just as it was for our forefathers, the impression made by that light fuels a strong desire to be filled with it again. But now we have to work to get it back. That flash of light was like a divine inspiration, like a foreshadowing of what life could be like if we could rise to our own potential. But we don't have the capacity to process something that we haven't worked for yet. So the underlying spiritual goal of the days of the Omer is a calling to every individual to prepare the vessels needed in order to receive this light once again. Look, each one of us is always trying to leave Egypt for good. And every person in every situation of personal exile. And then there are times when we do get a sudden illumination and inspiration, but then it departs and a person is left to one's own devices. Because in order to truly progress, we have to learn on our own how to advance slowly, step by step. Just like when a baby is ready to take its first steps, his parents hold his hand and guide him, but then they have to let go so that he can learn to walk, so he can learn what it feels like to walk on his own, and they have to also let him fall so that he can get up. And so too Hashem says, I can't do it for you. And he waits to see if a person is willing to make a move, to make the first move. And he allows us to make choices on our own because we have to show not only initiative, but we have to show that we're willing to take responsibility, to work towards redeeming ourselves one small step at a time. This spiritual work associated with the counting of the Omer relates to a very deep concept known as the 10 spheroids. This is a subject that really requires serious study, and it can't be simplified in a few minutes, but nevertheless, briefly stated, the inner dimensions of Torah wisdom teach us that in the beginning of creation, the Creator's infinite light filled all of existence. When he desired to create the world, he concealed his great light and created a space wherein the world could be contained. And all of reality was brought into existence through 10 divine emanations called the 10 spheroids that we can attempt to understand as midot, as attributes. God's attributes are like prisms that refract the wholeness, the total unity of Hashem's divine light. And it's through these attributes that God created the world, and through them that he continues to relate to us, to run the world, as reflected by the 10 statements of creation that we find in the Genesis narrative. And likewise, every spiritual process in the world, we are taught, is refined and refracted through these 10 godly emanations. They're manifest in every aspect and detail of reality. Now, the first 3 sephirot are analogous to the faculties of man's intellect. Our spiritual work during this period reflects the 7 sephirot, which are analogous to man's emotive qualities. Our task each day is to prepare an inner spiritual vessel for a new illumination with the goal of properly channeling and utilizing our emotive qualities. So the work we need to do involves the 7 lower sephirot called Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut, which means kindness, strength, harmony, victory, splendor, foundation, and sovereignty. Each week corresponds to a different godly attribute, and each day, we are taught, Hashem is sending every one of us new opportunities to rectify and hone our emotions towards creating the proper balance that reflects the godly image in which we were created. No 2 days of our lives are ever alike. Every day of our lives is a new gift shining a new light, and each day we're tested with a different aspect of each attribute, the particular emanation that Hashem is shining forth that day. And as we succeed in overcoming obstacles and fixing ourselves, we can build the spiritual toolkit that we will need to receive the Torah again anew on the 50th day, the upcoming festival of Shavuot. Our holy masters teach us that these days are the key to the entire year. Because these days of the counting of the Omer are so predisposed with great potential for powerful spiritual growth, the inner work that we do during these days can actually set the tone for our entire year. The word sephirah, Hebrew for counting, is related to the word saper, telling, as in the telling of a sipor, a story. Thus, it's the same root as the word sefer, a book. During these days, we're not only telling the story of our lives, we are writing the book of our lives. And sephirah is also related to sapir, a sapphire, a precious gem. By counting and writing our story in our own book, we can make each day shine as we strive to advance one step at a time towards reaching our full potential as people, as children, and as servants of the Creator. Thank you for watching this week's Jerusalem Lights Torah portion. May we make every day shine as we grow closer to our Creator, step by step, telling our story, fully living each day, overcoming the challenges of each day, and rising to our greatest potential. Shabbat Shalom.